Ready to go. I want to welcome everyone to our July 23rd GIS subgroup meeting. We will be having a presentation today by Mr. Scott Warner, and I'll let Susan do that introduction. But other things to note, some upcoming events, the South Florida GIS Expo in August, our Florida NENA Fall Conference in December, and mention to the NENA Standards and Best Practices, which will be held in New Orleans for a second year, and that's in January 2027. And without further ado, I'm going to continue to allow people to join in on the meeting. And Susan, if you want to take it from here, it's all yours.
No, I did.
Okay, reminder to mute your phones. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Susan Nelson. It is my pleasure to introduce Scott Warner, GISP, FPEM, who is currently the GIS and Addressing Manager for Baldwin County, Alabama Emergency Communications District. Scott has over 20 years experience in 911, emergency management, and GIS, and holds BS in geography. Mute your phones, please. He holds a BS in geography, and some of us long-timers will remember Scott because he got his start here in Florida, starting with Gulf County GIS and emergency management in 2006, where he was there for about 8 years, and then moved to Bay County GIS and emergency management. He was there for about 6 years before moving to Baldwin County, Alabama in 2020, where he is currently the GIS and addressing manager. I ran into Scott this past spring at Louisiana APCO NENA, where he did this presentation. So I snapped him up for our GIS subgroup. Scott's going to talk about the challenges of ensuring that addresses appear correctly on Google Maps, Here Maps, and other third-party mapping platforms that are often used by public safety apps as a base map. And we'll learn how to update those services and some workarounds. This has been a pain point for as long as I can remember. I remember a very early FLEEP meeting in Manatee County, and we got to be talking at least 15 years ago, where this came up, this subject came up, and it comes up periodically, has come up periodically ever since. So I was very excited to get Scott here to talk to us about this topic, and I will turn it over to Scott.
Thank you. That was great introduction there, Susan. Yeah, so I'm here to kind of share a little bit of my knowledge on updating third-party maps in 911 and anywhere in local government. We always have that issue of people calling in and saying, well, this address you've issued me is a bad address because it doesn't work on my iPhone or in my Android. And so when it's always frustrating to me as a GIS manager and addressing manager to tell these folks that, hey, we're the addressing authority. The address we've issued is in fact a good address. It's just those third-party maps, don't have it yet. So we have found it easier to just update them, these third-party maps, and therefore, help the citizen, become found. Today's digital world, Amazon packages and FedEx, UPS, always delivering packages. People want their packages. So we just found it's easier to help them out by, sending these updates to Google Maps and Apple Maps just to begin with. But I'm going to go over several of them and kind of give you some tips of how you can get started and how fairly easy it is. So can you see my slides okay? Or my slide?
Looks good.
Yes, we can.
All right. So some of the topics, like I said, we'll cover the Google Maps Content Partner Program, which includes Waze Map Editing, Waze Partner Hub. I'll even talk a little bit about Apple Maps, Here Maps, the Esri Community Maps Program, and then I'll touch a little bit on the USPS County Project and how you can work with the post office to send your GIS data to Memphis to have your data run against their database to find addresses they might have that you don't. And then wrap it up a little bit with the National Address Database and maybe even throw in some bonus content at the end. So today's public safety world, there's a lot of applications that we use in the responder world that use Google Maps, Esri Maps, and as different base maps in your product. Rapid SOS, you may be familiar with, is a Google Map base map, and then you can of course throw in your own base maps and of your own local data as well. But that base map causes confusion when dispatchers are accidentally looking at it and not paying attention that, hey, they're looking at a Google base map. So this is just another reason that we have found to keep Google Maps updated. Other applications, maybe in your CAD, also use various base maps. Us, we're a Southern software partner, and so they have a Google Maps base map, and we just, again, it's just so many reasons with First Due and Active 911, other apps that have base maps that use Google, and then of course What 3 Words. We're big What 3 Words advocates here, and they have a Google base map. So with Google Content Partners, to get started, you want to go to this link here, contentpartners.maps.google.com/portal to sign up. You can grab that QR code there, or I can share the slides with you, Susan, later, and to the group. But to do that, you just get started by clicking the Get Started button, and then create your account by clicking the Create Account button. Just go through the steps. I'm just kind of going through screenshot by screenshot here. You fill in your organization's name and then what you want to be known as on Google Maps, and then what your jurisdiction boundary is. So if you cover a city or if you cover a county, you just throw in that city name or that county name, and it will basically give you a geofenced area that shows you that coverage area. Just it kind of wants to make sure that it has it right, and if it looks good, you click next. And then here's where you want to kind of do some thinking. So you want to use an email. I would recommend that's generalized, so that way if you win the lottery one day maybe, or you move on to a new job, somebody can take over this account and continue on. So we just use like a general email address, like addressing at baldwin911.org is ours, to be the contact for this account. And then, of course, if you have to have your legal team review the terms of service, you can do that here. And but if your legal team's okay, you can go forward and click I agree. And at this point, you have a dashboard now, and in the upper right-hand corner, it has our logo in it I've uploaded, and up top it shows, your agency name. And this is kind of the portal where you go to view all of your information, all the data sets, and if you want to do a shapefile upload or a feature service, you can maintain that from here. If you want to do individual edits within Google Maps, you can contribute through here. And I will talk about each of these boxes here in a moment. But the first one here, this is an option that's fairly new in Google Maps. Google Maps did a couple of webinars actually with Alabama GISA, which is our GIS user group. And I think they even did one with a Florida group. But there's YouTube videos out there where I stole some of these screenshots from to kind of help out. But you'll see here as I come up that some of these screenshots come from their slides. But one of the new features they've added is this team member feature where you can go in and add coworkers to help you out and manage. We chose just to stay with the one generalized email address and just use it under there so that we can all see each other's data set and all the comments and notes, because you can chat with a Google tech with your submittal. So if they have questions, they'll send you a message and then you can message back and answer their questions. So we just chose to keep it under one account. But this is how you could add a team. And here, the next step in the team member addition is you can enter their name and their email address, and you can decide whether they're going to be a reader or a writer, and or if you need to remove their access if they leave. So this is where you, when you click to upload your GIS data, you click on the contribute under the datasets box or datasets box. And here you'll see some of our data sets that we've uploaded in the past. Most of these are shape files that we have zipped up into a zip file. And on the right-hand side, it'll tell us whether it's under a review or in use. And when it goes into in use, that means Google Maps has implemented it. And it does take, I think, a couple days, they say, for it to roll up and through all the different platforms that Google has. This is what you want to see is the in use every time. So that way it got submitted correctly. We went back in October, submitted a feature, our road centerline feature data set, so they can just scrape our data on a monthly basis. I think you can set it up to be reviewed more often. So if your data is changing quickly, you can actually have them scrape it weekly. But I think we just went the monthly route because we thought that was sufficient. So some of the data, and this is one of those slides I was talking about that comes from their presentation that you might find on YouTube. But some of the core data types that they're looking for are address points, roads attributes, political boundaries, and points of interest, or your POIs. All these types of data sets can be uploaded. Some of them might need to mute their line. There we go. So these are the other types of data sets that Google Maps, will gladly take if you want to share it with them. We just choose to do center lines at this point. However, we do send address points when we come across individuals that are having trouble having their address found. You can upload an individual address point or a whole subdivision. One of the biggest lessons learned I've done or I've learned over with Google Maps is to do not submit an entire shapefile of your county or your city. They will reject that. The feature service is okay to submit, but as a shapefile, do not. They like updates, like monthly updates. That's what they prefer. We have found it easier and quicker, though, to submit it as like a subdivision. So if there's 6 new streets in a subdivision, we submit that whole subdivision at one time. And we find that those make it through the review process much quicker, usually within a few days to maybe no more than a couple of weeks if there's questions. But typically 2 weeks is the max that we ever have to wait for seeing our streets getting uploaded into Google Maps. To contribute edits to Google Maps, there's a couple of different ways of doing it. You can click on your Android phone or in the Apple phone into the Google Maps app, and you can do edits through there. And then, but through your portal here, you can click on the contribute under the edits box. And you basically will click on the left side over here where it says map edits. And then, so I guess the point of this screen here, this slide, is if you don't have a GIS system, this is where you can, basically instead of uploading a shapefile, you can click this edits box and submit your edit through here. And this is what it looks like. So you can go in, name the submission and what type it is. If it's a road or an address point or a POI, you would select that from the list. And then you can give a description of it and click next. And here I'm just kind of pretending to draw a road in called NENA Boulevard that goes back into this resort. And you can select these segments and you can hold down the control key to select multiple segments. And this is where you identify what you are calling NENA Boulevard. And then you can have the options to go in and check boxes, and you can close roads, you can block them, which we had a problem with that in one of our cities during construction of a bridge. People were coming into Google Maps because anyone can do this. Any resident or person that has knowledge of Google Maps, they can go in and close a road, and that's what was happening in this city. Is they were closing roads, and we had to go back into Google Maps and reopen them because people just didn't want the construction traffic going by their house. But you can work with Google Maps in the contact, and I'll give you that contact here shortly, to reopen roads if people are closing them and they're not supposed to be. But with adding a new road, you simply click a private road or whatever type of road it is, and then click done. And then it would be submitted. This here is another example of how you can work with Google Maps to correct issues that people encounter. This individual was telling me that he was having problems with door deliveries and pizza drivers using this blue path to try to get to his house. And unfortunately, his house is back off the path here, and this is not a connection. There's a wooded line. It's thick in here. There's no way you can get a car from here to his house. And so I helped him by submitting to Google Maps the correction and how to correctly get to his house. And I did it through the submittal portal. And then I also emailed Google and basically kind of said, hey, and kind of explained the issue and was able to get it resolved. But here I'll show you how I took and added his driveway, the green line, into Google Maps. On the left side, just clicking suggest and edit. And then I added a local road, didn't give it a name because the driveway does not have a name. And I just submitted it simply just like that. And within 24 hours, his driveway was added, and you can see how the house is here. And the road's kind of off the screen here to the bottom right corner, but there's just no way you can get to him from that way. This was his access off of this county road. And then with an email or two back and forth with Google Maps, it got corrected. And I'd say probably within 2 weeks, I think it was, it got corrected. So now he can route to his house and have no issues. So this is like one of the other ways of submitting stuff on the left side in your when you got Google Maps up in your computer. On the left side, you could say suggest an edit to an address or to a road or to a place is missing, or maybe you want to add your business. You can help business owners get their businesses posted if you want, or you can just say, hey, business owner, this is how you do it. But when you click on that suggest an edit, you should get a menu of different possibilities of what you want to do to submit to Google to either add a missing road or to add that missing place or fix that wrong address. In this case, this was the old address to the 911 center. We have since, moved our location and changed our own address twice. Another way of doing it is when you right-click on Google Maps, you can say report a data problem. And in this case, a street was missing, and I added this road, this long, windy road out in the middle of central Alabama somewhere. I was helping another county. We got this road added, and then we gave it a name and submitted to Google Maps. Drew it in, gave it a name, and then it says, put in pending mode, and it's checked. This road here was a little bit more challenging. It did take a little bit to finally get it, submitted. And then as far as I know, it got added, but I hadn't checked. It's not in my county, but I was helping, again, a neighboring county get this corrected. So this is the email you all want to take down, geodata-americas@google.com. That is the email. That is the magic person that will help you get your problem resolved in Google Maps. If you have an issue that Google Maps is just not taking and something you submitted, if you send an email to that address, usually within 24 hours and no more than 72, you get a reply back from somebody on that. If for some reason you don't, I have found that if you just do a quick reply, bring it back to the top of their inbox, they'll get you a reply. But Sandra is one of the ladies that had give a presentation from Google, and she's super nice, but her team has got multiple people watching that email address for any kind of submittals to come through. If you want to check to see when the next time Google Street View is going to come through and collect map images, you can go to that URL and it will show you right here in the bottom left. This year, it looks like several districts or counties are slated to be, have their Street View run, but it tells you when that date range that they're going to be running and then or what year, and so you can kind of always check to see how often you're going to get Street View. After Hurricane Micah, it was pretty interesting. We had Google Maps, or Google, I should say, individuals show up on our front doorstep at the Emergency Operations Center and learned a lot from them and made some contacts when they stopped by to help us out during Hurricane Michael. And it's just interesting, like what they're trying to accomplish and do as well. But the Street View thing was something that they do after storms. Sometimes you can request to say, hey, we'd like to have Street View redriven because the scenery changes. And so you can submit a request after the cleanup is, kind of, our whole point was we wanted to make sure things were kind of coming back. We didn't want all the debris inside of Street View, of course, and Google's not going to come in when there's nails on the ground everywhere and and whatnot. But after this, several months, you can put in a request to Google and say, hey, can you please come back in and redrive our county because everything's kind of different. And you can submit that request and see if they'll take it. So Google owns Waze. If you're familiar with Waze, it's another application out there that people like to use to navigate. And to create that, you use the same account, the same content partner account, and connect the Waze to it. So when you log in, it's all under that same portal. And you can submit through Google Maps, and eventually it'll make it into Waze, or you can submit and edit to Google Maps and separately to Waze. And to do it separately with Waze, this is what this slide is showing you. You can kind of go up and click on, add the plus sign, and what is it you're trying to add. In this case, I was just doing a demonstration of a road. And then you would just click through that, and on the left side over here, you give it the name, and you add what it is, and then you would hit submit. We found that though we don't really submit the Waze separately. We just do Google Maps, and to us that's good enough. And then we don't have anybody telling us that they're having issues with Waze usually. So for us, I think it, again, we don't submit separately. But a program that exists out there in Waze that might interest the local government folks on this call today is called Waze for Cities. It's where you can contribute data, again, through a service, and in return, you can actually get the Waze data added to your, GIS services. So you can create you get your Waze data and feed it into ArcGIS Online, and you can create maps internally and do quite a bit of stuff with that data. But this is how you can sign up, is to Waze for Cities. So here, this URL, and then the Partner Hub, of course, is just where you can submit it connects to the Google Map Partner Hub. So this is an example in ArcGIS Online of our data coming through, but it is I can't remember if it's nationwide or worldwide, but it's quite a, it's not just your county that you're getting. You get everything through it. So then you can query and filter the data as you see fit for your project. But this here was just a demonstration of how you can bring that Waze data in using Waze for Cities. So we did like I said, Google Maps, Sandra and Holly. I've known Holly since probably my Gulf County days. We go way back. And when I used to do stuff in Port St. Joe, we used to go through and update the streets there, and I would use her as a contact whenever I had issues. But Sandra's goes back to the Geo Americas email I shared a moment ago. She's the one that gives the presentation. This is a YouTube video link to that presentation that you can watch, where we re-recorded it when Google Maps actually explained it more thoroughly and took a deeper dive into what I just explained. And then they talk about some other things that they can do. But a really cool YouTube video. And then I know there's a Florida group that I think did it. Maybe it was a Panhandle, I can't recall. And then I think Nizjik even did it as well with them. So they're trying to make their way around the Americas to educate folks on how they update Google Maps. So moving on to Apple Maps. Apple's a little bit more harder. I've actually found I have a lot more issues getting Apple Maps updated. And oddly enough, the CEO of Apple went to high school right here in the town where my 911 center is located at now. And still we don't have a connection with him. But this is to submit to to Apple Maps. You submit to the email address, maps@apple.com. It's kind of old-fashioned, but that's the way Apple chooses to do it. They don't have an actual portal where you can upload GIS data to. So what we do is we take screenshots and we simply email it to them of a subdivision that we've added, and just submit that map to them, and it gets added, but it takes a little longer. You can also use your iPhone or your iPad and use the Apple Maps application and submit problems through that. We try to hit it both ways. We'll actually submit it through an application on the app, and then we also send it as an email. And we find that it makes it in there, but they're not very good at communicating. And I did learn through all of this in the last few years is that TomTom is a data source supplier to Apple Maps. So if you send your data to TomTom, it's eventually going to make it into Apple Maps. And as you can see, Apple does their own little image collection as well. And these are some of the counties that are slated to be run this year in Apple Maps. And then it looks like they even do some extra things for transit and pedestrian backpacking, probably through indoor malls and such, that are being slated to be done in Miami-Dade and Hillsborough, as well as Orange County and Escambia. So for here maps, to upload your GIS data there, you can supply a feature service to them or upload it as a shapefile to the upload.here.com. And with this, you're kind of doing the same thing you do with Google Maps. You're creating that account and then saying what kind of format you're going to submit it as. And they take all kinds of formats as well, as you can see. Oops. And then select like the Esri format, shapefile or GDB. And then you upload it, and it looks like this. And it has a file name with that zip file. Typically, what we do is when we zip it up, we say take that same zip file and send it to Google Maps. We'll send it to Here Maps, and then sometimes TomTom and others. The same file. With Here Maps, you can also go in and manually edit. So if you don't have a GIS system, you can go to mapcreator.here.com and set up an account. And in this example here, we moved across the street to our new 911 center. And while I was actually creating these slides, I realized our 911 center had still not been moved. So I was able to use this as an example of how I took our point, moved it across the street, and reassigned a new address to that point. I took and just drug it. And when I drug it, it says, well, you're still related to this little drive behind the old building. And I had to go in and kind of update the address, give it some other place type names, the aliases type names and such. And then I even put in contact information for our center. Ensured that it said, the correct city name. And when I did that, it kind of said, whoop, okay, this actually looks like it might be better geocoded off of this road name here that we have showing Telecommunicator Circle. And sure enough, I agreed with that and said that looks good. It got Telecommunicator Circle. It put the 911, which is our street address, and then the zip code, and it linked it right to Robertsdale. And then I took it a step further and said, you know what, while I'm here, why not just put the building footprint on there? And so I went ahead and drew a rough little building footprint of our building just to add it to the maps, and then gave it a building type, and again, gave us some alias names. And then you can fill out all this other information that I didn't have. I didn't care about all that. And that was it for that. So if you ever have questions with Here Maps or issues with the Here Maps, local@here.com is the go-to email for that. That goes to a slew of people from here, and they'll be glad to correct something. They'll even do a screen share with you or talk with you if you need help. I saw them out at the Esri conference and got to speak to a gentleman I've known for a while named Alex, and he reminded me, this is always the best email to use and everything, which I've always known. And then I forgot to update the slide from when I did it in Louisiana, but there actually is, I didn't check to see if there was anything scheduled for Here Maps in Florida, but if you ever want to upload your data, your GIS data, you can go to upload.here.com as a reminder. And then Here Maps does feed your Garmin maps. So if you want to try to update it, someone's telling you that their Garmin is having an issue, you want to go to Here Maps to submit that correction. With OpenStreetMaps, you can go to openstreetmap.org. This is an open source third-party map supplier that most of you probably already know about. And you can set up an account and sign up. And again, I just use that general email. And then here, you actually, when you get your account created, you can go up to the edit button and you can submit edits through here, through their portal. And you think, man, Scott, how do you keep up with all these different, sources? It is quite the challenge. I'm fortunate enough to have a staff of 6 with me, so we stay pretty busy. We are a fast-growing county and manage about 200,000 address points down to the unit level. We've even started mapping all of our hotels and getting every single room collected as an individual address point. And we have all of our RV lots, condominiums, apartments, all that stuff mapped individually to prep ourselves for next gen 911. And we've even taken a step further to start mapping things like elevators and identifying what's elevator 1 versus elevator 2, and then mapping things like pool phones, because we get a lot of calls for pool phones because our health department goes through and tests those things. But those are all things that we choose not to upload into Google Maps and Apple Maps as far as that detail, that level of detail. We feel like that's kind of not necessary. So, but the main point of a hotel or something like that, we will upload if requested. Another one we'll touch on is the Esri Community Maps program. This is where you can provide feedback by selecting an area and saying, if you want to, as you can kind of see in their little circle, you could circle an area and say, there's a new road that's been added in this area, or there's a bunch of address points missing in this area. And this is like a very general like feedback. But here you can actually go in and draw in the road or add that address point or several other layers. You can actually individually just kind of go in and draw it. And then, of course, under the shared data is where you can upload or give them your feature service of your center line or address points. And they'll take more things like building footprints as well and park, even trees. With the community program at Esri, you again, you can fix routing issues. You can provide your imagery. If you had geocoding issues, you can submit all that through these different apps that they have under each of those boxes. So when you clicked on I think it's the edit features, it'll come up with these different apps and so forth that you can select to fix. If you have like a area of interest or a POI type thing, you can go in here and submit through these different apps on Esri and edit them to add missing schools or maybe to add buildings on a school campus. You can go in and kind of make your base map a little bit clearer and add even the sidewalks and the trees and whatever else you've got mapped. You can share that with Esri so that it goes to the base map. And then with USPS, the county project, this is something that's kind of one of those things I discovered when I was with Gulf County. You can work with your postmaster to do this, or you can just go on through this link here and sign up for the program. It's free, but you could take your GIS address point data and send it to Memphis, Tennessee through an FTP link that they'll provide to you. And you can do this once a year for free, and they will help you to identify things that they show in their database versus what you show, and they'll give you back a little report. We're cleaning our data still, so I haven't sent the data since I've been here in Alabama to Memphis just yet, but I am signed up for this program and look forward to doing this soon. But I've also learned that, and I haven't checked it in the last few years, but if you want to send your data again within the year, I am told that the postmasters can do that on your behalf. So they can send it to them as many times for free. So if you feel like you need to do it more than once a year, you might check that avenue and talk with your local postmasters and see if they'll work with you on that to do that. But I think once a year should be sufficient because you're going to get back a pretty big dump. I'm pretty sure that you're going to work through and spend some time trying to clean up and trying to figure out, where people have created addresses you don't even know about. We were fortunate enough to do a project where we compared our data with USPS using a vendor, and we identified 57,000 addresses in USPS data, voters registration, utility data, and so forth that were not in our address points. And today we've wrapped up that project and are moving forward now with trying to clean up our data even further beyond that project. The county's project goal is to improve the address quality in both data sets. So it's the benefits are going to include that the fact that it's free is probably the obvious one. And then it identifies like no match addresses. So it'll probably provide to you back the no match, and then you can try to figure out where those no matches are located and try to link them then to what they should be. And you can reach out to those individuals to do address corrections or whatever it may be. We spend a lot of time doing address corrections, fixing addresses from the 80s and 90s, that got assigned without the forethought of what next gen 911 would look like. So we deal with a lot of corrections. And just this morning, actually, I'm working on a highway that just got renamed and sending out 371 address changes here in the coming days. And that's going to require me to go to Google Maps, Apple Maps, and update the names on that highway to get that new name and so forth, and help those individuals out with their change. But what's really cool is the post office will work with you when you send it to like AMS or the postmaster, and they'll link that person's old address to the new address for up to a year. So they'll still be able to get their mail to their old address for up to a year. The only thing with the USPS county project is that you have to fill out a form. It's called a PS form 5118. That gets you the access to the FTP and gets the account basically kind of set up. I did take some of these slides or this information from their website, but I don't know if anyone has CD or DVDs anymore. But again, you can do it all through an FTP process now that they have set up. And down here, it does show you what the file will contain. It's the no match list. It'll give you a match standardized addresses, congressional variances, county variances, as well as missing and invalid secondary files. One tool we use here in addressing every day is under their website called the zip code lookup tool, where you can go in and try to identify what the zip code is to a particular location. We've gone as far as to make our own zip code layer because that's just something you can't find very easily out there, or at least that you would trust. So over the last several years, we've taken a file and just modified it as we have found mistakes in it or so forth. And we basically have it so that, because if you don't already know, a zip code is not a polygon, it is a route. And so they don't like to use and think of it as a polygon like most spatial people do. And so we wanted something as a polygon to help us to know when we're assigning an address, what is the postal community and zip going to be for that location. It just helps that customer that comes in for that address to know what their full address is. And it's oddly enough, postmasters don't even know all the time what is the correct zip code, and they'll usually refer to us. But I always point them back to this site. It's their own site that they can figure out what the zip code is currently showing, and if they feel like it needs to change, that's on the postmaster to correct. But this site is very helpful in identifying zip codes for an address. To contact the USPS program, you can do cds.ncsc@usps.gov. I've not tried to call them. I usually just do email, but they did provide a phone number on their website. I highly recommend trying to make friends, though, with your postmasters, and then of getting your AMS contact. Apparently, Florida split up, I think, into 3 or 4 regions with the USPS. I feel like when I was with Bay in Gulf County, we were out of Jacksonville, if I recall. But if you get your AMS contact, I have found that to be super beneficial here in Alabama. Is when I get a postmaster that won't answer my emails or take my phone calls, I reach out to AMS, and their boss will funnel on down and have a talk with them. And it's really been helpful to get things done when you have that issue. But luckily, we've got a pretty decent relationship with all of our postmasters here, and I don't have too much trouble. But it's super helpful to have that AMS contact. AMS being Address Management System, if you don't already know that. The biggest thing I kind of wanted to leave you all with too is seeing if you guys can try to get your data into the NAD. There's a whole website out there in Story Map that the NAD has created that I provided here in this middle link that shows who is currently participating in the NAD. And every quarter they release a new update to the National Addressing Data Set. This is where all of our address points and center lines can funnel up to. And so we started off in Baldwin being the first county to supply the data. And then I got our GIS manager for the 911 board. We worked really hard in the state of Alabama to bring all of our addresses and centerline data into one portal under one schema. And so he has submitted that statewide data to the NAD. So now I can take the NAD service, feature service, and bring it into our CAD map. And our dispatchers now have address points for every single participating entity around the nation. So if we get a call from Dallas, Texas, they can see all the address points in Dallas within our CAD map and search them. But I just noticed Florida's, there's only a few counties or maybe a couple counties in the Panhandle that have ever submitted data to the NAD. So hopefully, this will educate y'all to look at that idea of working together to try to submit data. Even if you have to start off, submitting your county data, they'll gladly take it. If you just want to submit your county data and then work with the state to try to bring that all into one combined data set to submit it as a state. But hopefully we can get the Southeast kind of fixed in and fill in these holes that you can see with Georgia and Mississippi. And I think Louisiana's on track to try to come on board more so now that I've spoken with them out there on it. If you have any questions or you want to get with a NAD, you contact nad@dot.gov, and they're very responsive. So they can send you the FTP information of where you send your GIS data to, and then they even provide back a dump file if they have duplicate addresses that they have found, or they don't need the certain type of address. They'll send it back and let you know what got dumped out, and then you can go from there and figure out if you need to clean your data or if it's something that's just not a big deal to you. And we don't submit all the room information, all the sub address information. We just submit the main data to the NAD, and that way, again, that detail doesn't go out through there and be used, because the NAD is a feature service that's being used by anyone. And this does zoom in a little bit better on the Southeast. As you can see, there's only, I think, a couple counties up there in the north, maybe Holmes or something, that has actually participated. What 3 words? I talk about this, and not that it's really a third mapping provider, but we are big users of it, and they are, that basically it's a system that has wrapped the entire globe that can be super helpful for special coastal counties like us. When you're out over the water and there's no civic address, you can use what 3 words to search within Rapid SOS or sometimes within your CAD maps, and it's super helpful for finding people that don't have a civic type location. We're able to take and put canned messages into our text messages and send it to an individual during a 911 using the us.findme.w3w.co URL. That is a public safety URL that you can submit that will can be a canned message, though, that when the user clicks on it, all they have to do is say allow location access, and then boom, it tells you their 3-word location for where they're located. This is an example of the 911 center where you can search that address. We just happen to have a good what 3 words on our dispatch center called headsets.notebook.grandiose. 2 of those words basically are very common in dispatch. So how fitting. I guess we were kind of lucky. But this is a locator that you can add to your ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Online projects. You can go through your settings of your organization and add the locator in there. So all your ArcGIS Online maps, when you go to search for an address, you can also search for a what 3 words location. But again, what 3 words is basically like a 10-foot by 10-foot cell grid that's wrapped the entire globe, and every grid is unique, and you can search an address or what 3 words. This is the API and how to get set up with that. If you want to take my slides here later and try to do that, but you go to the developer website to set up an API key, and it's free to do for public safety and pretty simple. And they have a lot of tutorials. Google Plus codes. We talked about Google Maps a little earlier, but Google Plus codes is Google's way of kind of doing their own little locating, basically using a non-civic address. Highlighted here, you can see they have a alphanumeric kind of grid system that they've created as well. We don't touch on this in our public safety events to individuals, but oddly enough, we've already had 2 911s from alarm companies where that's all they provided to us was the Google Plus code. So our dispatchers are very familiar with this and test on this just as much as they do what 3 words, because it's coming, the technology's there for it. And so that day, that was all that alarm company gave us was that address. There was no civic address given in those 2 calls. If you want to learn more about Google Plus codes, though, this is the URLs. And then we also have canned text messages in our Texty app that we can send out to somebody if we felt like this was the way to go. But usually we do the what 3 words. It's a lot easier for somebody who doesn't even know what Google Plus codes or what 3 words is all about. We find that what 3 words is a lot easier to get to somebody. So after all of that, of what I've just talked about today, this website is actually something I've had in my back pocket for a long time, and I keep forgetting about it. But this actually is maintained by the U.S. Space Force, interestingly enough. Although you look at it and you think, man, this is a government website, but it is. And so if you go to this website, it'll actually give you a nutshell tour of everything I talked about today and tell you if you're having problems with Apple Maps, this is how you go and submit a correction for Apple Maps. But in this example, it looks like I got Bing Maps, right? So if you have an issue with Bing Maps, you go to Bing Maps and it tells you how you can go through and suggest an edit. Super helpful website. It's even got MapQuest. MapQuest is making a comeback. And so you can go, if you have issues with MapQuest, you click on here and it'll take you to MapQuest and tell you how you go through to submit an edit. Let's say you're having issue with FedEx. You can go here and say, well, I want to click on FedEx, and it tells you what mapping site you go to correct the FedEx issues. Got UPS, USPS, and Amazon as well. And let's say somebody comes to you and says, well, Uber's giving me problems. My address doesn't come up in Uber. Well, you can go to Uber Eats there and click on that plus sign, and it will expand and tell you how you can go about correcting Uber's maps and where they're getting their map supply from. Super helpful website. So these are some contacts. I just learned Alicia actually just left what 3 words. So Penny, though, it should still be there. But if you want to reach out to what 3 words and kind of have a conversation with them, Penny's a good contact. And if you have issues, you're always more than welcome to email me. And I did a big panel actually with what 3 words down in Orlando. I think it was at the APCO conference a year or so back, and that was pretty fun and enlightening to learn what others have done with what 3 words in public safety. But super excited about them, and we've had several saves already using what 3 words, and just a big advocate of them. If you want to, reach out to Garmin, they have a support forum. But again, updating HERE maps will help you out with Garmin. And then TomTom, they're supplier to Apple Maps, as I said earlier, but this is their site if you want to go to their map share tool. And they have contacts that sometimes will periodically reach out to you, but they were at the ESRI conference as well and spoke with them. Well, I kind of breezed through that, I probably did, but that's the, if anyone's got questions, I'll happily take them. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to email me, and I can answer any questions you got through an email.
Thanks, Scott. That was great. A lot of really great information there. We do have the ability to post your slides on the NENA website. So if you want to send those to me and Ira, we will get those on there.
Okay.
You've got a ton of websites and links, and I think having those all in one place on the website would be very valuable for our members. So yeah, feel free to send those over to me. I jotted down a couple of things that stood out to me. One thing was that it's you and 6 people working in what is obviously a very active, involved addressing and GIS office with your sub-address points and the projects that you're doing. So I looked at population real quick, 276 or 67,000 in Baldwin County, and you got 7 people in GIS. And I just want to make that point because that's what it takes to run a really good, efficient GIS operation. And, it's so hard in government to get another person added under the budget. And sometimes you need some really good justification to add more people. But yeah, that stood out to me, the number of people you've got working there. And then it stood out to me that there's real people over there at Google. Sandra, maybe you said her name was, and her
Yes.
crew that are taking your emails and your calls. Yeah, I figured they were doing all of this by AI, but it's kind of reassuring to know they've got some actual people with eyes on this. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was great. And then I also think that you may have talked yourself into doing another presentation for the GIS subgroup when you talked about your address correction projects. That is something that we struggle with here in Florida as well, as you know. So maybe
Yeah.
continue about that next year.
Yeah, yeah, the addressing corrections, that's always been a challenging one, even when I remember when I was at Bay and Gulf and taking a lot of heat from people, when you do change their address and how do you work through all of that, and then when you have a city that decides they want to, name a street after somebody, then you got to sit there and send out corrections to all of them. And it gets pretty overwhelming sometimes, but it's, I'm fortunate enough to have a larger team. I am one of the larger teams here in Alabama for addressing, but I sit on the addressing working group with NENA, and it's amazing to me what we're doing to ourselves with the amount of work we're putting on ourselves to as we move forward with even looking at indoor mapping now, and how are we going to accomplish all of that? And I come from that one man or one lady GIS shop, where it's one person trying to support an entire county, and so I feel for those small counties. I know what that's like, and it was because of that county though that I learned a lot, and you tend to be that one person that has to figure it all out, and so this was my attempt, starting it off with Google Maps. How do I update Google Maps, and figuring that out, and then one day moving on to Apple Maps, and then one day how does Amazon do it, and over the years I've just collected all these sources and just kept them up, and today been able to provide them all to you here in the slides that from my experiences. But correction project, we're automating all of our letters now, and AI is such a big deal now, and to have a developer on staff that can create some code that spits out a address assignment letter, address verification letter, and address correction letter in 3 different templates. Oh, that saves us so much work, and when we're spitting out hundreds of letters a month. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a presentation. So I'm going to put you on my list for that because I've done those address correction projects too back in the day, and nothing was automated. It was all by hand, and changing hundreds of addresses, with a spreadsheet is just absolutely brutal. And so I would love to hear more about how you've automated some of that stuff.
Yeah, sure, sure. I could probably even get our developer who he'd probably be glad to do that and explain and show the code and whatnot. And he gets excited about that kind of stuff, and he's done some pretty fabulous stuff for us.
Great. Yeah, sounds like you've got a great staff up there. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Does anybody else have anything they want to ask Scott? We got a couple minutes left. Well, hearing none. Thanks again, Scott. That was really very enlightening. I appreciate that. Quick reminder that August 27th is our next GIS subgroup meeting. We have Steve Kennedy, who is the Assistant County Administrator for Sumter County, doing a presentation on GIS maintenance. We had our spring meeting at Sumter County, and Steve talked a little bit about his program, and it generated a lot of buzz in the hallways, which I caught. And so he has agreed to do that presentation. And then in September, that will be a FLEEP meeting. So we are still looking for an October presentation if anybody's got any ideas. Anything else, Ira?
I just want to add, and I'm showing the Florida NENA website so that once we have this recording published, how we can share that. And also, Scott, if you want us to share the presentation itself, folks can visit the Florida NENA website, flnena.org. And if they come down to the chapter committees section and go to the database committee page, this is where we have our schedule of GIS subgroup and FLEEP sessions. And what I've added to this page is a link to our Florida NENA YouTube channel, which is what we've started using to share our recordings. And on the Florida NENA YouTube channel, it has a lot of legislative recordings. Plus, also what we've done is set up a GIS subgroup playlist where we're starting to put all of our recordings for these GIS subgroup and FLEEP sessions. So if you want to go back and listen to this, it will be here on the Florida NENA YouTube channel. And again, visit the Florida NENA webpage, the database committee, where we'll have a link to the Florida NENA YouTube channel, as well as a link to Scott's presentation once he shares it. And thank you, Scott. This was very informative. It's probably stuff we would have loved to have learned 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Thanks to our presenter, Scott and Ira, for hosting the meeting. And you'll be getting our invitation to next month's meeting a week or two before the meeting. And in the meantime, feel free to contact me, Ira, or Jacqueline for any questions or issues. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.